Hey there folks, Jason here from Blue Label Bastards Wargaming, and I have got a battle report here for you that I played a few days ago, just this past weekend. But first I want to give a brief update on the channel. I'll do a separate video on this, but suffice it to say I safely arrived in the good old US of A, and have spent the past couple weeks primarily unpacking, get the family settled, but I've also ventured out to a number of the friendly local game stores and a Games Workshop or two here in the Northern Virginia area, and have been lucky enough to have a number of pretty good games. Actually, all were really good games. Played a full Saturday, got 2 Warhammer 40k fights in with a local gaming group up in Maryland. Got to bring out my Imperial Fists, had a really good time with them, and had a game against a great opponent at what most likely will end up being my primary FLGS game parlor up in Chantilly, Virginia. First game was for Nova Tournament Prep, 2800 points against a Dark Elf opponent, and if you've been watching my videos, you know I kind of like the fluffy list. Well, I was soundly trounced. It was a great game. It was my first time playing there, so I didn't bring a camera or anything. But it was a great opponent. First time I ever played Dark Elves, and going against 3 Bolt Thrillers and a big block of Executioners with a fluffy Dragon Ogre theme list. I had fun. The army did not. So anyways, I set up another game at Game Parlor against a Dwarf opponent, another army that I'd never played before. And he wanted to bring his tournament list as well, but we didn't play the Nova rules. We just wanted to roll the random rule book, give him a chance to play with his army. It gave me a chance. I brought a little bit harder of a list. You'll see how that goes here. So let's go ahead and move forward. So, what the game ended up being, 2,800 points. That's the Nova list. He brought his Nova list. Warriors of Chaos versus Dwarves. We ended up rolling a meeting engagement scenario. And from the outset, just want to say, I had a great opponent, relaxed game, helped get me back into wargaming shape a little bit. My opponent's Knight of Passive kind of played fast and loose with the rules, and it was good to play with somebody who was very tournament focused and like, you must declare all your charges in a precise order, and kind of really helped me to kind of stick with specific order of things, like I was all over the place before. But so it was up front. It was a great game. So let's go over the lists. So my list, Warriors of Chaos. Like I mentioned before, I brought my Kolek theme list up against Dark Elves, and it just didn't really end well. So I didn't want to bring a super nasty Warriors list, because I played Warriors before they were cool. And so now if you show up with Warriors, they're expecting the Demon Prince, double Chimera, you know, the kind of the gross, I wouldn't say it's gross, but the tough list. And I have never been a tough player, or in terms of a list optimizing player. I'll play hard with the army that I have. So I decided to go with an all Khorne list, which I've played in a tournament before, and I think just by virtue of surprising my opponents, I ended up winning that tournament. This is a variation of that, but it was also one I threw together very quickly due to some family issues. Frankly, I was just running late, getting out the door. And that is not an excuse, but that's, I was clicking in Battlescribe as I'm on my way there. So if that explains some of the weird things in this list, it's just because I had to quickly get things together and get out the door. So I brought a Chaos Lord, Mark of Khorne. Everything in the list that can have a Mark of Khorne does. And there is no magic, as you'll see. So kind of sticking with the list, or the fluffy factor. So Mark of Khorne always strikes first sword, Flaming Breath, which will come back to haunt me because I failed to use it. Scaled Skin, Talisman of Preservation, and a Dragon Helm. Exalted Hero, BSB, Mark of Khorne, Halberd, Dawnstone, and this was actually a mistake that I just typed in, and I did it in Army Builder, Battlescribe, whatever. I gave him both a Halberd and the +1 attack sword. I noticed it during the game. So I took off his +1 strength. So that's a mistype here. So he's got +1 attack, Enchanted Shield, and Soul Feeder. 2 groups of 5 Warhounds, Vanguard and Poison attacks. 17 Warriors, Mark of Khorne, Halberd, Shield, Standard of Discipline, and a Musician. 10 Forsaken of Khorne. Again, I play them not because they're necessarily the most competitive choice, but a good friend of mine got them for me as a birthday present. So when I can, I will run them in every list every time I play my warriors. 5 Marauder Horsemen, Mark of Khorne, Shields and Flails. 7 Chaos Knights, Mark of Khorne, Sorcerer Weapons, Ranger Standard for the Strider, Musician and Champion. 17 Chosen, Mark of Khorne, Halberd, Shields, Banner, Swiftness to get them into combat that much faster, Musician, and then War Shrine of Khorne, and then 2 groups of 3 Skull Crushers with Musician and Standard. My goal with this list was, frankly, to have enough speed with the Skull Crushers and the Knights, and even the Forsaken. They have a 6-inch move, to get up in my opponent's face. I was expecting a Dwarf list that was going to kind of sit back and castle, and then to buy me some time for my infantry blocks to get up there and kind of wreck some face. And I mean, anybody that's played knows that Knights and Skull Crushers aren't exactly slackers when it comes to combat either. So that was the goal. And then the War Shrine, essentially just a 6 dice, the Giver of Glory, and I wasn't going for a Demon Prince, but, you know, to buff up my 2 characters that I had on the way there. Obviously, this list is very weak against magic, and I did not tailor it knowing that I was going to play a Dwarf player. I did know I was going to play him. I did look at his list before the game, so there was no real list tailoring going on here. But let's take a look at his list. And he surprised me. He did not bring the typical gunline list, and I was not that familiar with Dwarves other than watching them in battle reports. I've never played against them personally, but you'll see pretty quickly that he brought a maneuver combat list. So he had a Lord with a Master Rune of Smiting, Rune of Might, 2 Runes of Warding, Rune of Speed, and on Shield Bearers, I don't know what a lot of those things do, but it did definitely gave my Chaos Lord a run for his money and more. So we had a Thane BSB with the Stroller's Rune, and a couple other things made him pretty tough. 2 Runesmiths for magic defense, and the Hatred, which really won't matter because we'll talk about that later. 30 Longbeard Shields, Old Guard Musician Standard Bearer with the Stroller's Rune. 40 Warriors, his General went in here with great weapons. 2 Gyrocopters, 1 Gyrocopter with Vanguard. And then he only brought, in terms of war machines, a cannon and a grudge thrower, and then he had 28 hammers, and those hammers definitely were a major issue for me in this game. And then 2 groups of 5 Rangers machines. So, because this was the first time I played, you'll see here, and I apologize if some of the pictures are off, but this was the first time I've tried doing a picture-based battle report versus all of my other ones essentially were ones where I took videos at the end of each turn. So, setting up a new place, I just met a new opponent, kind of feeling my way out a little bit, so I didn't do a good job of taking pictures from the very beginning. So what these next couple shots are going to serve as is both an overview of the board and my first turn. So when I got there, we decided just to roll up a random mission out of the BRB and ended up with meeting engagement. So we sectioned the table off and just kind of deployed terrain. If you look at the terrain, this is all terrain that he built, especially that really impressive Dwarven-themed tower, which is awesome. And so I thought I'd be cute, and I really wanted to take advantage of the Knight's ability to ignore terrain. So I picked the side of the board with more terrain on it. So initially I was on the other side of the board, and I switched to this side, thinking it was going to screw him up more. And you'll see how that turned out. So we divided up the board, and I won the turn to go first. So I picked this side. I deployed my entire line, basically everything, and we'll go over the deployment here. He tried to seize the initiative, roll a 6 or whatever, and he did not. But he also got really dinged when it came to stuff that showed up at the end of the first turn, and we'll go into that a little bit. So this is the deployment, and so at the end of my turn 1, I had no charges. But you can see here that the Warriors moved into the tower. The Forsaken kind of shuffled a little bit to the right because all he deployed at the end of his first turn were the hammers up there, and we'll go into this in more slides, and a couple other things. So his deployment really threw me off. Obviously, I had to deploy everything at once. And we'll see how I attempt to adapt to the curveball that he threw at me, curveballs he threw at me, and that were inflicted on him by this scenario as well. So for terrain, We put down 2 swamps. One was a Kemerian quicksand, which won't really matter. The other one is a mystery swamp, which kind of won't matter either, other than the fact that there will be a tremendous amount of failed dangerous terrain tests on Capital Warriors later. And then there's the River of Light, which we'll get to. So this is my right and flank and center. And on the left, you can see that this is the other side of the board. So we've got a hill on the far left, and then here's the rest of my battle line. And I'll go through each of these in turn, but you can see everything just basically moves up. So let's take a little bit closer look at the armies. So I had 2 things that went into, I guess, that showed up late. Essentially, it was most of my Vanguarders. So I rolled 1s for my Marauder Horsemen and one of my group of 5 Warhounds. So the Marauder Horsemen I brought on right behind the Rangers and the Gyrocopter here on the far left of my line to kind of monkey around with these guys. Again, they're Mark of Khorne. They are on the charge, strength, or first round of combat, strength 5. So essentially, they're the typical kind of fire and forget cruise missile Khorne guys. So moving to my right, 2 groups of Skull Crushers. The Warhounds had already moved forward when I started taking pictures. And then I had the group of Chosen here that ended up rolling +1 toughness on their early round roll, pre-game roll to see what benefit they get from the Eye of the Gods. They're right next to the War Shrines. They get to roll a boatload of dice. And you can see in the front left there is my general. And then to the right of that unit is the War Shrine, and then there's the Khorne Warriors with halberds and the BSB. And just a couple other things to orient you on the battlefield. You can see on the far end of the board is his cannon, and then just poking out the other side of the tower are his Longbeards. I think he's got a Thane in there as well. And then moving down my right flank, so there's the Longbeards, a little bit better picture of them. Again, I apologize, I'm trying to get a hang of taking pictures. And then there's my group of Forsaken, and then my Chaos Knights. And then the unit that caused me the most trouble this game were the Hammerers with the BSB. And I knew as soon as he put those down that was probably the worst matchup for my Chaos Knights. And I was really trying to figure out a way to deal with these guys. I knew with their great weapons, they were just going to maul the Knights, even if I did a boatload of damage, and then with his improved saves I was balancing with the Longbeard. Do I go for the Longbeards and take the Hammers in the flank? Do I take the Hammers in the flank? The Forsaken there, what am I going to do with them? So this caused me a lot of problems. But he had a couple issues. He had actually some big issues. So when it came to rolling 1s at the beginning of the game, the Grudge Thrower up there did go on the table, but he rolled 1s for one of his Gyrocopters, his BSB, no, one of his Thanes, sorry, I think I marked that wrong, Rangers, and then the big block of Warriors with his Lords. So he didn't have any of that stuff deployed, and my opponent seemed to be pretty down about his chances at the beginning of this game, but you'll see how it turns out. But he had a bunch of stuff that was going to come at the end of his movement and turn one. So you saw what I did. Essentially, I just moved up. Didn't declare any charges. So he comes on, and he, I think, sees the matchup with the Knights and attempts to capitalize on those. Declared a charge with the Hammers, failed. Declared a charge with the Longbeards against the Forsaken, and he failed. So that was good for me. Those dice there that you're going to see in the swamp, one's red, one's blue, they are marking each other's turns. And so then he declares a charge with the Warhounds that I had moved up, and I had moved them up either to kind of present an opportunity for him. I didn't want him to try to get a charge off on anything else, although I guess it would have been fine if he would have gone into the Skull Crushers. But I was going to do an end around against his War Machines. He went after the Warhounds. I decided to hold, I think, and he killed them and overran. And then you can see he moves the Rangers up here to redirect to the left-hand group of Skull Crushers. And end of move phase, he brings the Gyrocopter on over here, and that Gyrocopter's going to be here, 202. And then he brings the Warriors with the Lord on my extreme right flank. Again, facing the nuts. And then the Rangers come on over here to screen his war shields. In his shooting phase, this is where the litany, the stream of bad luck, where both of us roll a lot of ones at critical times. This is where it begins. And I think he was shooting at the tower. He was doing flaming attacks, and he thought he'd get to reroll a wound. And I forget what the exact order was, but I think he rolled a 1 for hits. He re-rolled it, rolled a 1 again, and then he rolled a 1 to wound or something like that. But a boatload of 1s. So bad luck beginning for the Dwarven shooting phase. And then he does the same thing when it comes rolling to wound with his Grudge Thrower, which I was happy with, but I felt really bad about. So what happens on Warriors turn 2? And I didn't put an overview picture in, but just so you can see, I have loaded my left flank with most of my combat power. The only thing that's kind of hanging out there on the right are the Chaos Knights and the Forsaken. The Forsaken are kind of a throwaway unit. I wanted to put them into a flank somewhere, but even Forsaken and Chaos Knights in the front and the flank of the Hammer unit, I don't think are going to do enough damage. Certainly not to break Steadfast. They'll do a lot of damage, but not enough. So unfortunately, my Knights failed their Frenzy test and had to go into the Hammers, which solved the conundrum that I was dealing with, but that was not good. The Forsaken, I can't remember if I elected to put them into the Longbeards, which maybe I didn't have a good appreciation for, or they failed their fronting check as well. But they went in there, and spoiler alert, they got crushed. They killed a fair number of Longbeards, but not really enough. In the Magic phase, I threw 6 dice. I forgot to mention, in the first Magic phase, I tried to roll a bunch of dice on the War Shrine, and he blocked it with one of his runes or whatever the dwarves use to block magic. But this time I got +1 toughness off on the BSB and +1 weapon skill on the Lord, unfortunately. He doesn't really need any more weapon skill. And here I kind of made a decision. I said, you know what, I'm just going to leave the Skull Crushers on the left, and they're going to hopefully deal with all the gyrocopters over here and then get in the War Machines. And I need to turn these guys around. The War Shrine was just going to hang with my 2 character blocks, but most importantly, the Chosen, and we're going to have to deal with the debacle that's quickly emerging here on the right flank. So over here on the left, the group of Skull Crushers on the left crushed and overran the Rangers. The Skull Crushers on the right crushed and overran the Gyrocopter. The group of 5 Marauder Horsemen on the left. The previous turn had taken a couple losses from the Steam Cannon on the Gyrocopter there. Incidentally, he dropped his bombs and I think he did 1 wound to my Skull Crushers. So I had 3 Marauder Horsemen. Thinking back on it, I'm not sure if I rolled up their 2 attacks each or not. Basically, they did 1 wound, and then the 2 attacks back from... maybe he killed 3, and he had 2 attacks back. They both hit, they both wounded, and they killed my Marauder Horsemen. So that was not awesome. So immediately the Skull Crushers are kind of already out of position. And then over here on the right, you can see what happens in combat. So I go in, and I forgot to mention. So early on, he had his grudge roll, and he rolled a 5 or a 6, so hatred against my entire army. So he gets re-rolls across the board, which will prove incredibly devastating when it comes to combat. So we'll get to that later. But so the Knights go in, 7 Knights, Khorne doing a boatload of attacks. I only killed 6 Hammers, and he kills 5. It looks like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 Knights. He's got ranks. We both have a banner. I think his BSB's in there, but I stick. But you can see he's already measuring for his Lord and the Warriors to come in the flank, and that's going to spell a problem later in the turn. So, Dwarf turns 2. He overran. He ended up overrunning from the Forsaken combat, or moved. I forget how it ended up, but then he turned around to face the other way. later on. I don't have a picture of it, but the knights are going to get crushed. They just can't hold out. He's going to fly over this way and get ready to try to steam cannon the Skull Crushers with his one of his 2 remaining gyrocopters. And he's going to take a pot shot. I forget at what. I think it might have been the Skull Crushers, but he rolled another 1 to wound with his cannon. Again, feeling really bad for his some of his rolls. And so this is kind of what I'm facing at the end of turn 3. Oh, his shooting, I think he might have peeled off a couple warriors here and there. Or he took some pot shots with the grudge thrower. I apologize, I don't remember exactly what happened. He might have taken some shots at the warhounds here. So he plays this actually pretty smart because he realizes that now that I've moved into the tower, I need to have enough room to get out of the tower. And so he has positioned, and maybe he turned the Longbeard block around. Yeah, so you can see here that the Longbeard block has been turned around. So he has kind of the, if you're looking at the tower now, he has the front right blocked by the Longbeards. He moved up his gyrocopter, so the front left is blocked, and I can't get out. And he knows that I have to get out to the right here to do some anything basically. So I had to reform my warriors to come out that way. They were 6 wide, now they're 5 wide, sticking out. I move the Chosen up, and I move the War Shrine up for support because I've lost a boatload of points with the warrior or with the knights, and I am just way out of position. I should have never gone into that tower, I realize now, with the halberd wielding warriors. So on into my turn, roll a little bit better for the War Shrine. We get +1 strength for the BSB and +1 attack for the Lord. And so I turn and move the Skull Crushers, left-hand Skull Crushers toward his War Machines. I turn the ones to the right to go after something. And if you look at that block of terrain there, I am fortunately blocked. We ended up playing it where his cannon can't see my right-hand group of Skull Crushers, so they're protected for a turn. The Warhounds are there. They'll play a bigger role later. So that's what's going on my left flank in the left-hand part of the center. So Dwarf turn 3. He did a great job of this. Obviously, the glaring weakness in any Khorne-based or heavily frenzied army is the fact that they get redirected all across the board. So he parks his 2 remaining gyrocopters in front of me, and in order to redirect. And he attempts a charge with his warrior block with his general against the Khorne warriors and fails. He turns around again his Longbeard block and proceeds to drop a grudge thrower round right on the center of the unit, but only kills 2. And then my warriors turn 4. So I gotta get into combat for a whole host of reasons when I gotta start earning some points. So I declare charges with the Chosen, and the warriors both get in. I move up the War Shrine to redirect, sacrifice the War Shrine and redirect the Longbeards. I think this is, he uses his other scroll to make sure that the War Shrine doesn't get anything else off this turn. So essentially it's really done. Then we go into combat on this side. And yeah, so I declare a challenge with my Chaos Lord, and he decides to accept with his Lord. And I don't know what... I know that there's some failings with my kit. I should have done the Helm of Many Eyes instead and given him a better weapon. But he's only strength 5 at this point, my Lord. And he's got his Lord has some kind of build where he gets D6 wounds for every time he... Or D6 wounds for every wound he gets, so he has multiple wounds rule. I think for anything, probably strength 5 or higher. So I might do 1 wound to him, because I've got 6 or 7 attacks. But it's only strength 5, I'm hitting him on 3s, re-rolling, but not much gets through. I think he has like a 1-up armor save and like a 4-up ward. Or 5-up, well, it was a 4-up ward, I think. He can correct me, or you guys can correct me. Whatever it was, he was a really tough dude, and he's toughness 5, and I didn't get through. I got like one thing through. And then he turns around and hauls back, and I think he gets 1 wound through, and he rolls like 3 wounds. And kills my lord outright, which you can see down there on the left. Sucks. And then he killed, I think between the 2 combats, he killed 6. Total, 3 chosen and 3 warriors. But you can see that I do 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 22. I killed 22 warriors. This is why I like foot warrior lists. If they can get into combat against the right unit, they're going to shred it. So they probably cut that unit in half. And so I think I'm in a pretty good position here. Oh, incidentally, if you look at the chosen unit on the right, I think I lost maybe 1 or 2 to dangerous terrain tests, which will only begin and won't stop for some time. So he breaks from combat. He's double 1s. BSB doesn't get it. He flees. I pursue with both because I have to. And I roll, I think, like a 10 and a 7. So I'm like, sweet, I've got him. You know, at least I'm going to get some points back. He rolls a 10. No, he rolls a... Does he roll an 11? Maybe I roll a 7 and he rolls a 10. Essentially, he gets away. And this was my turn, so which is going to give him a turn to rally. And I knew I was in trouble because that means I'm still going to get hammers in the flank into the warriors. But I don't have a choice. Again, one of the failings of Frenzy. And I think when I go to over in here, I think I might lose another chosen to dangerous terrain. On the left, predictably, the War Shrine is crushed by the Longbeards, but they did a job. They redirected that unit away from this combat. And then over here on the left, the Skull Crushers beat the 1 gyrocopter that was blocking me in the tower, and they go to overrun. And I want them to get closer so I can get into combat over here, but unfortunately the dogs are in the way, so they just stop. And then the other Skull Crushers go off the board, and they're going to come back on here. I think this picture might be out of order. This might be what I do in a later turn. But essentially, you'll see later, the only thing I can do on the left flank is move the Skull Crushers up to go after 1 War Machine and the dogs to go after the other. So, Dwarf turn 4, predictably, the Lord rallies, which sucks, and he reforms there. So I probably don't have the combat power to kill him with the Chosen block. And why do I need the Chosen block? Because I took the hammers in the flank of the Khorne unit, and you can see the damage there. I killed 2 hammers and lost 2, 4, 5 warriors and the BSB in the challenge. I forget what happens to the BSB, but he just flubs. And so that's not good at all. And this is his turn. And so what happens? The warriors break, and he overruns into the flank of my chosen. So any chance I would have had on my turn to get back into combat with his Lord's unit is over. And essentially that unit's going to be over anyways. So this is what it looks like. And so the warriors who are below 25% flee through the swamp and lose a couple more models to dangerous terrain. And then in Warriors turn 5, not much really happens because all we have is this combat. The hammers easily defeat my chosen just through combat res. Looks like I killed 2. He didn't kill all that many, but it was enough to break me. And so then we're on to the Dwarves turn 5. And he's trying to figure out a way to get this unit, because under Nova rules right now, I don't think he gets any points. Or no, in Nova rules, you might get half points for a unit below 50%, but we're playing the rule book now. I mean, the game's essentially lost, but he's just trying to figure out how to get the most points. So he's trying to charge me, and for some reason he holds back with 1 unit with the charge. I think he overthinks it a little bit, but he clears a charge, so the Chosen turn and flee forward. What he's hoping to do is make them charge far enough forward so they're in the charge arc of the Longbeards in the lower left, and then they can catch them and get all the points for that unit. Meanwhile, the other warriors continue to flee down into the right toward the river, which we don't know what it is yet. And then over here, these guys turn around to face on his turn. So they turn around to face the Skull Crushers, who have since moved up and gotten the Warhounds out of the way. So maybe that did happen a turn previous. But it's all a moot point because you see that dotted line. That's a cannonball that comes slicing through. He timed the bounce just right, right before the wall and then over, and kills both the Skull Crushers. And then here, so Warriors turn 6. They continue to flee because they haven't rolled double ones. And we find out it's a River of Light, so it's a randomly, drawn light spell. And the first one, he rolled it, and the first one we thought it was Shem's Burning Gaze. I'm like, son of a, what is that, D6 strength 4 hits, or whatever it was. But turns out it wasn't that. It was the one where you get double your movement or whatever, just a randomly generated spell. Which, great, I'll flee twice as fast. So this is Warriors turn 6. He never caught the Chosen, but fortunately we got into combat here with both the Skull Crushers and the dogs. The Skull Crushers killed the ones on the left. The dogs killed the Grudge Thrower. The dogs killed the cannon with poison, and that is the end of the game. So parting shots. I have a love-hate relationship with the Blood God. If I'm going to do a fluffy list, that's what I'm going to choose to do. It's either him or Tzeentch, but just the frenzy, it's fun rolling a boatload of dice, but with the proper opponent that knows how to do it, you just get led around the nose. And I knew that going into it, but I wanted to have a fun theme list, so I kind of did it to myself. But ultimately, there's also a difference between a tournament prep list and fun ones. He didn't have a super tough dwarf list. It was really interesting. It was really fun. It had a lot of Vanguard. Unfortunately, he kind of got screwed from the very beginning with the rolls for this particular scenario. But ultimately, I think that his deployment kind of helped him, because if he would have had to put all that stuff down, I'm guessing I don't know that he would have overloaded my right flank like he ended up doing. Maybe he would have if he's on YouTube. I'll send him this. He can weigh in if he chooses to. But it allowed him to watch my army deployment develop, to see what I was going to do, and he was able to kind of essentially neutralize a good chunk of my army, which spent most of the game trying to essentially turn itself around and go to the right. Part of that was because I failed in the maneuver phase, and the critical mistake I made for this battle, I think, was going into that tower. Had I kept the Halberd warrior unit out, I could have put more pressure on him. I could have gone out where I wanted to. I could have just moved around. I was worried about his war machines, and his war machines, his cannon sucked this game, except for the Skull Crushers at the end, but the Grudge Thrower was just hitting every single time. It could have done a lot more damage, but I could have put a lot more pressure on him and gotten a little bit more control, regained the initiative a bit, I think, if I would have kept the warrior unit out of the tower. So that's definitely on me. The critical combat, the one where I could have turned it around and made it a little bit less of a loss, was breaking the warriors but not catching them. I mean, the guy was going to rally to leadership 10, and they weren't below 25%. Had I caught him there, I still would have had the hammers in the flank, but that would have been a boatload more points. I probably still would have lost, but it would have been much less of a loss. It turns out I think I got 300 or 400 points from him, and he got like 1,700 from me. So, not awesome. But both of us were laughing because we had a terrible run of luck when it came to rolling ones. He rolled a boatload of ones for the artillery. I could not stop rolling ones for dangerous terrain test, and I probably lost 10 models through dangerous terrain, 10 infantry models. But all in all, it was a fun game. I'm glad I have landed at a game store where people tend to be pretty relaxed. Good times. Hope I get to play with this opponent again. So on behalf of Blue Label Bastards Wargaming, I hope you guys enjoyed. Again, would welcome your comments, questions, thumbs up, subscriptions, and hopefully we'll see you soon in the next batrep. You guys take it easy and happy wargaming.